and welcome to U.S. Government, Unit 1, pages 16 through 17. Important to know, we will only be doing questions number 1 on page 17, but we'll do all of page 16. Okay, so at this point, you should be up to date on the Articles of Confederation and why they were just an absolute abject failure. If not, you'll want to review from the textbook. We're not spending time on it in class, but it will be on the test. I promise you. It's a tough question for a lot of people because they just gloss over it or they don't study it. So make sure you've studied that. Because if you don't understand that, this might lose you just a little bit. Hopefully not, though. So the first political parties. Today, we know political parties mostly through the Republicans and the Democrats. And there's many other parties as well, but those are the two big ones today. They did not exist during the time of the writing of the Constitution. They weren't there yet. They didn't come until decades later. The original parties were the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists were named because they supported the newly written Constitution, which created a strong federal government. And the Anti-Federalists, they didn't like the Constitution at first. They thought it was just tyranny. They thought too much power in the hands of the federal government, so they're anti the federal government. They want power just among states, so each state can make its own decisions, because they were afraid that too much power would lead to tyranny, and then everyone's rights would be lost. So the Federalists, again, they wanted a strong national government. They didn't want the League of Friends, which was such a failure on the Articles of Confederation, because what the Anti-Federalists wanted, they had, and it failed. It just absolutely failed under the Articles of Confederation. That's why they were all meeting to have a new government. And this new government, this Constitution as they called it, provided everything that the Articles of Confederation couldn't. Protection, from enemies of the state, foreign countries that were planning to come in and take us over. The French looking to take us over. The Spanish looking to take our land. Even England, yeah, we kicked them out, but that didn't mean they were weak. That didn't mean they couldn't come back and get us at a weak spot and take it right back from us. Things like that have happened in history. So this was about making sure that the government could provide protection swiftly and efficiently and effectively. Provide order, some kind of form of organization and consistency of laws from state to state. Trade regulations, so that states trading with each other would be trading as if they're the part of the same country and not like 13 little mini countries. And finally, to make sure all states, all citizens in all states had individual rights that were protected. And finally, it could keep the economy stable and unified under one government. Just one government with one currency, one system of economics. The Anti-Federalists freaked out. They said, oh, that's great and fine, but we need our individual rights. We need things like protection of free speech. These things weren't laid out in the Constitution at the time. Free speech, freedom of religion, freedom to have a fair trial. These things were not in the Constitution. They were freaked out that the government didn't clearly spell out these rights should be given to the people and cannot be taken away. There might be confusion, and the government could just decide when and if they're going to enforce rights and what rights people even have. So they wanted a Bill of Rights. Remember that top 10 top 10 we're going to talk about later. They wanted a Bill of Rights, a list of these rights. A bill meaning kind of like a list. So they wanted a Bill of Rights. If they were going to accept this Constitution, they wanted a list, that's a bill, a letter saying what rights they had, all people had, not just them, that the government couldn't take away. And they had a lot of fear-based arguments they were making to get people to vote against this new Constitution, and they were quite extreme and somewhat paranoid. but effective. It was working, and the tide was turning against the Constitution. The Federalists were losing votes, or potential votes, losing support, and it looked like the Constitution may not be happening. So the Federalists fought back by writing a famous set of documents known as the Federalist Papers, because they realized they were losing the fight for the new Constitution, but there was no better ideas being presented. It was this or go back to the failure of the Articles, in which case within 10 and 20 years we might all be speaking French, or we might all be speaking Spanish, or we might still be speaking English, but we won't have an American government because the English or the Spanish or the French were coming to get us. That was true. The Constitution, in this Federalist paper, they argued that the Constitution would protect the liberty of every citizen because there would be one government. So instead of 13 governments with everyone with different rules, one government could make sure everyone would consistently have the same rights. And it reminded people that without a strong national government, again, Spain, England, and France would come to get us. We need to get unified, we need to have strong leadership, or we won't have states, we won't have federal government, we won't have anything, we're going to be colonized all over again. And these arguments were kind of fighting fear with fear, and it worked. And the Constitution did end up being ratified by the 13 colonies, by the 13 states, just barely, but it was ratified. But that wasn't it yet. That doesn't necessarily mean game over, Constitution wins. Congress wrote 12 amendments, because amendments, they start in Congress. It's congressmen who will write it and vote on it first. And then the states just vote on anything that gets passed Congress, which is House and Senate. So Congress wrote 12 amendments in 1789. Only 10 of them passed. The other two, they just felt like they're just kind of redundant and don't really accomplish anything that these other 10 do. These 10 passed the voting at the federal level and eventually at the state level. And they did protect the 3 types or categories of rights, which was the individual freedoms, protection against government abuse of power, and the rights of citizens accused of crimes. These 3 categories of rights were very firmly protected. And these 10 amendments are called the Bill of Rights. Since that time, many amendments have been added on. Many, over time. But only these first 10 are considered the Bill of Rights, because they were all put in at the beginning of our country's formation. And these are the rights that, not necessarily the most important, but they're considered the foundation of all other rights. And many amendments after that were clarifications of these rights. They were making these rights stronger and making sure accessible to all people. They just made it more and more cemented exactly what it means to be a U.S. citizen and what freedoms you have and cannot be taken away from you. And that's it. So make sure you don't forget to do the homework textbook assignment tonight, 22 and 29 to 30. This is 3 pages. But go ahead and go to the video assignment for Unit 1, pages 15.